you won't see a Hellenistic piece that was your response. It just won't.
That right there.
What?
Oh, you really? Is that how you film it?
I'm just gonna film it
We
like
got to
that.
an exclamation point. Y'all at any time get food, obviously. And I have some customers who are getting cold.
No, I don't.
Probably gonna get
And
That's
Andy
from
brought
me,
cookies.
by the
I try to
way.
bring healthy-ish stuff.
Yeah.
I've been trying to tell that to people.
I
That's healthy.
felt it. Yeah, I brought carrots and popcorn's not too bad.
You
Right?
eat the blue cookies, your mouth will turn blue.
Yes.
aren't too bad. Okay, so this is way back from the beginning, correct?
We like take notes somewhere.
The ziggurat. Oh, do you want to? What'd you say?
Should we?
Oh, it's up to you. I mean, do you want just plain paper?
I'm actually gonna go.
I'm gonna put this PowerPoint in its entirety on School Town. Oh, yeah.
Did you talk to it?
No, I said I was.
My dad took a full cover off today now. It's fine.
Start warming up.
Yeah. At least you have a neighborhood.
You have access to a pool.
Like right now it's closed. Yeah. Till Labor Day or whatever day comes up.
Labor Day.
Not Labor Day.
Oh,
The other
Memorial
day.
Day.
Yeah, that's the one.
I was like, my goodness, it's after school.
Yeah, I get a much better view.
That's cool.
That's the one type of food that's the cheapest.
What?
No, that's what else it is. String cheese.
Yeah.
Like deli. I think it said
Because I can.
That's all in one bar.
I'm about to go watch a whole bunch of little boys for till like midnight. So.
Oh, that's not fun.
That and then like an 18-month baby girl.
Did you watch
They finally got a girl.
Yeah, was it trying? Which was the puppet one?
The puppet water.
No, that was good. I thought that one was good.
They persevered.
Okay, so ancient Near East, they're building with mud brick for the most part, some stone. We're starting at about 3000 BCE, and they're building ziggurats, of course. Maybe you remember this mask, or head, I guess. Remember this piece was flat on the back? It wasn't totally rounded out, so we think it's possibly Inanna, we're not sure. Marble, and originally these negative spaces would have been filled with gemstones or shells, something reflective and pretty. The Warka vase, which is now in a billion pieces after the war in Iraq. Okay. What do we call those bands? Registers, and it's telling a story. Okay, and then cylinder seals. This one's made out of lapis lazuli, but remember that was like a narration around the side. It also had the bands, and you'd wear it around your neck. If you were well off, you'd wear it around your neck, and then you'd be able to seal documents. Everyone's favorite Eshmena statuettes with the big eyes. And what do we call the pose with their arms? With their hands that way?
Does it start with
A V. Votive. Good. Votive pose.
remember that?
Well, in your defense, Molly, you weren't
Well,
here.
I mean, still.
The standard of
We didn't even study these in class, though.
Yeah, we did.
Oh.
Drew wasn't mentally with us.
Never mind.
The standard of remember this would have been carried like in a procession, and it had a war side and a peace side, and this is inlaid, so we're seeing early mosaic work inlaid with lapis lazuli shells, and then this had the wood frame, but the wood frame was in such bad shape by the time they dug it up. Bull-headed lyre, and there's the image on the edge. What is this pose? composition.
Not controversial.
Profile. Frontal.
It's the
Well, it's twisted perspective, yes, the composite perspective. But when you have something in the middle and something on either side.
Oh.
Heraldic composition. Heraldic composition. You have a central image and then an image on either side. Head of Akkadian ruler from Nineveh. And we don't think this damage is just because it's old. Y'all remember that? So we think that this was probably stabbed in the eye by the people who defeated Acadia. And this would have also had precious gemstones in the eyes. Everyone remembers Narmsen, I hope. Or what we have left of it. Gudea was the very pious ruler. He's the one that had the temple plans carved into the bottom, I guess his skirt, essentially.
What civilization?
This is in, that's a good question. This is in Acadia as well.
Do you think they'd ask something like that?
yes.
No, it's Neo-Sumerian.
Potentially. Oh, is this Neo-Sumerian?
On the notes, it's Neo-Sumerian.
Oh. Wrong. Yes. Neo-Sumerian. Good. They could, more than likely, it would be ancient Near East.
Yeah.
Or the period. Okay, the Queen Nafarasu and then the Code of Hammurabi are both Babylonian, I believe. Is
Oh,
that what the notes say?
Steel Law Code Hammurabi, Babylonian. Yeah.
So proud of yourself.
Lamasu. Okay, and then remember the citadel, the idea of a citadel, so you have this city that's fortified, right? And it's usually built up, and at the highest part you would have your ziggurat or your temple. Okay, so a fortified city, which we see come and go throughout early civilization. And then the Lamasu, remember this is the one that had the 5 legs, so if you saw it from the one angle it seemed correct, and then from another angle it seemed correct. And then from the from the correct angle it seems kind of weird, because you're seeing both sides. I think this is Assyrian. Assyrian is where we see a lot of the low relief carvings. So if you look at this from the side, it doesn't stick out very far. The Ishtar Gate at Babylon. Babylon had multiple gates. This is just one of them. Something that's significant about it is that the material, that blue glaze. Okay, so that blue and the yellow glazed brick.
Is this Neo-Babylonian?
Yes, Neo-Babylonian.
Would that be considered a structure? Because on the practice one it said talk about 2 structures, and I used Ishtar Gate. Would that be acceptable?
Yes, I would consider that a structure.
Okay.
Because it's part of
It's
the
part
wall.
of the wall. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Darius the First and Xerxes the First had the palace built at Persepolis in Iran. Remember, this has become obviously it was destroyed, but it had the really, really expensive finishes. It had the giant wooden doors and the fancy carpet and the gold framing, all of those things. It was beautiful. Of course, been destroyed, but this is still a place that is considered pretty significant as far as a destination point to travel in Iran. It's important to their culture. Okay, chapter 3. This is the Palette of Narmer, not to be confused with Narmsen. And so, what went in this spot?
The black
Makeup.
The makeup, the black makeup that they would have used. Probably kept their eyes from infection, and it also helped with reflection from the sand, okay, of the sun on the sand. A serdab was the sealed room, and then it had the ka inside. Okay, so this is kind of the layout, and then this pyramid where the top's been kind of cut off is the mastaba. And so they have a shaft. Sometimes they had false shafts, like multiple kind of fool people, and then they would come and leave offerings. Standard grid, remember that the Egyptian were the first people who really came up with that layout, okay, or proportion of what they thought a person should be. Now, it's not correct, okay, but this was a standard that was followed by Egyptian artists. And this view that Molly mentioned before, where your part of view is frontal and part of view is curved, is either twisted perspective or composite view. And the eye is frontal, which doesn't make sense. But that's how they did it. Imhotep with his stepped pyramid. Okay, this is a dozier. And then eventually we get to pyramids that are what we think of more traditionally. Menkaure, okay, Khafre, and Khufu.
Khafre is the largest, right?
Yes, Khafre is the largest, and they were all grandfather, son, or grandfather, father, son.
Does it go in order?
I think no. I think
the biggest
that the
one is the
biggest,
grandfather.
yeah, the biggest one's the grandfather, Khafre, and then Menkaure, and then Khufu is the smallest. And then this was family members that were obviously less important. And remember that the whole exterior was covered in this limestone that was just fit together perfectly, and a lot of that is gone. So what we have is a rougher texture than we would have had initially. This is around, around 2500 BCE they were built. And also the Sphinx is there. Hopefully you remember that. Menkaure and his wife. What is it called when you're stuck to the stone like this? Wedded. So they're wedded to the stone. Left foot forward, which we're going to see repeated so many times. Proportions are not exactly correct, remember, because it would be very strange for her arms to be that long. Okay, so again, just following that standard. And then here is Khafre enthroned. He's also wedded to the stone. And this material, remember, this black is the diorite, very expensive. Hatshepsut. Okay, this is in the Middle Kingdom. This is her mortuary temple. But she wasn't actually buried here. She was buried someplace else. This was to kind of memorialize her death. And this is, remember, in situ. Okay, in situ means it's in its place. It's carved into a place. It's stuck there. It can't be moved, and it's not freestanding. Okay, so a building can't be moved, but it's not part of a natural formation. So in situ means it's carved into its face. If you were to like carve into a wall, okay, like in a restaurant or something, in a bathroom, I don't know, that would be in situ because it's there. It can't exist outside of that space. Temple of Ramses II, and remember he had his wife and children not even coming up to his knee. Okay, and this is also in situ because it's into the side of the mountain. And why just have one sculpture of yourself? Why not have four? The hypostyle hall was that style. Oh, I thought I had another picture. Was that style of hall where you have the columns down the middle that are tallest, and then you have the columns on the side that are shorter, and so it ends up kind of being like a bridge. Like it would come across, up, over, down. Okay. And they had light on the side, so it allowed light to flow in. And that was, obviously it's before glass windows, so just allowing light to come through the hall. And remember that, like with Ramses, they set this up so that at certain times of the year, his birthday and the day he became pharaoh, different parts are illuminated, so that his statue would be illuminated. Senmu with Princess Neferua. Okay, so he was her tutor. Very strange sculpture.
It looks almost modern.
Very much so. Very much so. And bizarre. I mean, it's like, is she decapitated? What's happening there? Fouling scene. There were a bunch of different frescoes that we saw. Remember, this is before true fresco, right? Before wet fresco. So we're working on dry plaster. So the material, the paint, and the background are not chemically bounded. Binded. And so you're going to have more peeling away. It's going to tend to be less stable. And this stood for, if you went with someone into the reeds, what did that mean? I don't remember. And you meant you were having an affair, right? It was like, we're escaping this little woman. We're escaping into the reeds. That was like a scandalous kind of place to go.
What are all the different names for like dry fresco and wet fresco?
It's like bueno or buono fresco. I'll have to look it up. They're Italian terms. And one is wet and one is dry. But I'd have to see which. I'd have to look in the notes. To
Okay,
see
but
which
then
is which.
wet fresco is true fresco.
Wet fresco is true fresco. Correct. Yes. Akhenaton and the Amarna period. Remember, this is kind of a standalone period, and it didn't last very long. It really just lasted with Akhenaton. And he wanted art to not be so rigid. They didn't have to follow the standard proportion that they come up with, that formula. They didn't have to have the exact poses. They could be a little bit more relaxed and almost androgynous, okay, because he looks effeminate, correct? And he's got a little poochy belly, okay? And then here is he and Nefertiti, his wife, and their daughters, who are nude and very oddly shaped. Okay. This bust of Nefertiti, this was by Tutmos, and this wasn't supposed to be a finished piece. Remember, this piece was a model that he kept in his studio, we believe, and he referenced it. Okay, her neck is very long, which is kind of foreshadowing for some of the art we're going to see in mannerism. And then it's unfinished. Okay, and then Tai was his mother-in-law. He had the sculpture of. And this is showing emotion a little bit more. They look tired. I think it's the eyelids.
He was the one who said there's only this one Egyptian god, right?
Mm-hmm. Declared himself the sun god. Tutankhamun, obviously, the mask is so famous, King Tut's mask. This is one of the chests that was found in kind of the loot of his burial room. So there was all of these different objects in there, and this was one of them. And it's well preserved, being wood, because it was buried. Right, it was kept in this airtight location. Okay, chapter 4, Pre-Aegean, Cycladic, Minoan, and Mycenaean. Cycladic, hopefully, are pretty easy for you to, recognize. Minoan and Mycenaean, you might get confused. I certainly do. The profile is similar, that curvilinear line. But Cycladic's kind of standalone, right? Because we haven't really seen this, nor do we see it again until 20th century. Okay, these poses. So most of these are marble. It could be male or female. Remember, a lot of times the males were holding an instrument. Okay, very flat, obviously not correct proportions. Okay, the palace at Knossos is Minoan. And what was the legend about why there were so many little spaces? Remember?
Because it was for the Minotaur.
The Minotaur.
Didn't
Right.
they keep like things that they traded with the Orient? I thought?
Well, that's probably really why they had so many, was for trade. But they say they had so many because of the Minotaur that was a maze, right? So they were trying to be able to stay away from the bull. Okay, or the creature, part bull, part
Man.
Is that what it is? Part bull, part man. Okay, so the palace at Knossos. Very confusing floor plan there. When you see a black wall like that, what does that mean?
It's wall.
Or a black line, that's what I meant. Sorry, a black line like that. It's solid wall. It's solid. Okay, also at the Palace of Knossos in Crete, 1700 to 1400 BC. Simple columns compared to what we will see, with a kind of bulbous top, not fluted. Minoan woman. Here, this is obviously just a fragment piece, but that very distinct profile, okay, and the frontal eyes, which are obviously influenced by Egyptians. And then we talked a lot about this piece, the wool leaping, which Max pointed out one time is probably metaphorical. It wasn't really done. Something he'd read and said that they didn't really leap over bulls. That was a metaphor. But this is what it's representing, is that wool leaping ceremony. So we have the bull, we have the man, and we can tell it's a man how.
Because it's red.
Yeah, because he's dark. And women are light. Okay. And then very elongated figure. curvy line. Almost, I mean, think about what we're setting now. It's similar to Toulouse-Lautrec with those lines. Okay, he was the little man that painted on all the different.
The best.
So, I mean, like the little man. I mean, like literally. Yeah,
Red.
post-impressionism. Spring fresco. This is similar to what we're going to see in Pompeii.
And Dr. Seuss.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is Dr. Seuss.
Were you not there?
No, I didn't come till the 17th.
And the harvester vase, okay, and the Camaras ware, both Minoan. Camaras ware was right, this was kind of to celebrate the fact that they were right on the ocean or had access to trade there. And so we saw octopus jar, the fish jar, and so you're going to see those sea creatures repeated. Since maybe getting towards Orawakui, although not totally, at least not to the extent that we'll see it later. And then the harvester vase was a very small piece. Remember, 5 inches was the diameter. So the amount of detail they had in the carving for it being such a small piece, and this was originally gold leaf. So it would have been really shiny. I know, very, very tiny. Oh, yes. The snake goddess, which we don't really understand. This is from the Palathegnosis. We don't really understand what's happening. Okay? Probably a goddess, probably showing her domination over nature. Obviously, fertility is represented here. But the eyes, or just the face, I mean, that should bring to mind Inanna, the masked Inanna, or the Eshnunna statuettes. Okay, that unibrow and then the large open eyes. And then this we think is probably a young god, and this was made out of very expensive material. Now, kind of confusing. The stand that's holding it together is obviously a modern addition. And so this was just found with the legs and the top. He was cut in half. Not cut, but broken in half. Mycenaean. Mycenaeans were rich in what material?
Gold.
Gold.
Oh.
Gold. And so that's why they were taken over too. And they didn't build fortified walls like the Minoans did. And so they just were an easy target for Mycenaeans. This is the funerary mask, and what do we call when this gold is beaten like this from a piece? What do we call that technique of hammering gold? Or any metal, doesn't have to be gold. Repoussé, good. Repoussé. And then the Mycenaeans are also the ones that kind of trademarked this corbelled vault. And so you have the walls going up, and then at the top is a point. Okay. And what do we call this kind of masonry that are these huge rocks with no mortar? They're just stacked. Mary knows it.
I don't.
She's
I think
she see. What is it? No,
That's
corbel
the-
just refers to that shape. It's named after this thing with one eye.
Oh, cyclone.
Cycladic masonry. So it's as if it would have taken a cyclops to lift those blocks. That's where the name comes from. So it's so heavy. Okay, how did they do it? Well, they must have had a cyclops. There's another example of cycladic masonry. This is the Lion Gate. This one was on the 2012. No, not 2012. 2004 test, I think. Lion Gate. Been going back and seeing what's. I think there's going to be a limited manuscript. I'm really feeling like it.
That's really bad.
There hasn't been one in a while. I know.
That
Look at
one,
Hales was on there one time.
no, that one essay you gave us over that was in the manuscript. That was from Morrison's really bad.
Ugh. Okay, this is the treasury, or Atholos is kind of the name of this dome. Okay, what do we call this triangle right here? Do y'all remember?
Resting triangle.
Good guess. Relieving triangle. Means the same thing as resting, starts with an R. Okay, and this is the layout of what it looks like, and then inside, so it's covered. It's empty in the middle, has that stone skeleton, and then it's covered in the ground or dirt. And that's what it looks like inside. So all of these are stacked up in such a way that it works and that it holds itself up. What do we call this at the very top? That piece. Good guess. Keystone, I think, refers to above the door. This is a capstone. Similar idea, though.
Multiple choice would have gotten it.
Yeah, I know. So many of these. Okay, these are Mycenaean sculptures. Okay, so we have the Repoussé mask. We also have this face, which is similar to Inanna. Okay, even looks similar to the Minoan faces. These, we think, potentially goddesses, and their bodies crack me up. They're just so curvy. Okay, and then the warrior's face, which I think is one of the funniest pieces we look at because of those noses are so like something you'd see on a modern cartoon. Very like Phineas and Ferb. Right there. Very funny. Okay, chapter 5, moving into Greece. Traditional Egyptian versus Middle to Late Greek art. Thinking about what we looked at before. So traditionally, the Egyptians were very strict with their style. Things had to be done in a very certain way, except for the Amarna period, right? Rules of symmetry. Work was often commissioned by the pharaoh. Nudity was generally reserved for children and slaves, conquered enemies, although the Amarna period, that was an exception as well. Figures were usually very static, stoic, rigid, okay? Usually based around religion. Whereas Greek art was pretty liberal with their style, okay? More realistic and expressive. We're going to have Praxiteles setting up kind of that canon of proportion that is followed by some, but it's not as strict, okay, as it was in Egypt. Nudity was common for different social classes. Figures were fluid, showed movement, and usually we have a focus of philosophy, mythology as well, but philosophy was included. And then when we're talking about early Greek, geometric versus orientalizing. Okay, this is the geometric crater. Okay, now where would this crater have been set?
Wasn't that?
Yes, it's in a cemetery. So this is a grave marker. Think of it like a grave marker. A lot of the craters in the amphoras had the kind of panels that I think look like ears. They kind of come out like that, and they're thinner. So amphora and craters were often used as grave markers. Hopefully you can recognize those figures, the triangle top and the, well, I don't know what you call that, kind of wishbone bottom, okay, and that pinched waist, very much influenced by pre-Aegean Minoan figures, okay, or cycladic figures. And then Monticlos Apollo is kind of our piece that we have that we think represents the Orientalizing period. Remember, this was a small piece, only 8 inches, the cast in bronze. Wide eyes, long neck, strange body. This is the Lady of Oxery. This is limestone. Okay, not a huge piece, but it's showing kind of what's happening right as we're starting the archaic period. And how do we know if it's archaic? The smile. Almost all of them have that. And she even has a little bit of a slight smile. And what was the purpose of that smile?
To show life.
To show life. It wasn't to show happiness or sadness. It was to show life. Her hand is strange. Her fingers and her hair. Her hair looks very much like what?
Egyptian,
like a pharaoh piece, right? Like we saw in Sinmute a second ago. So kind of a strange layout there. Okay, archaic period, talking about the changes. We're getting more realistic with the actual figure part. Doric and Ionic orders of architecture are going to come about. Remember, we won't have Corinthian until when?
It was like.
Yes, well, it was right at the turn. Well, when we're kind of going to more Roman, but Hellenistic period is when we have Corinthian. So up to this point, we have Doric and Ionic. Okay, Doric first, the simpler, and then Ionic is a little bit. It's the one with the scroll. Greek vase painting, and they were done black and red. The Croesus boy, or man, he's larger than life size. I mean, probably for that time period. Okay, very muscular, but he still has what Egyptian qualities?
Left foot forward.
Left foot forward. What else? Frontal, very frontal. Even looks like his hands could be, wetted beside him or holding a rod. His hair is even kind of Egyptian. Okay. The peplos core means what?
That's female.
Female. Okay. Core and koros. Koros is male. So this is a female. Her body shape kind of cracks me up. I mean, we've gone from, look at the Minoan women who have very curvy hips, and then now we have hips that are very small, very straight, okay, compared to her upper body. And peplos means what, or refers to what?
Isn't it the clothing?
The clothing. So we had the chiton, which was kind of a wrap, okay, and then we had the peplos, which was this linen garment pinned at the shoulders, and then it was gathered right at the waist. The calf bearer, okay, this was at the Acropolis. It was probably a statue that was brought there as a offering. Okay, what's significant about the composition of calf bearer?
The X.
The X that we have formed here with the arms and the legs, right? That's giving us that focal point. And we're going to see this idea of calf bearer repeated with Christ figure later on. Barely wearing any clothes. He's wearing this little gown you can barely see. But they're fully, trying to carve the ab muscles. Okay, so getting some of that realism in there. But the face is not realistic. And we know it's archaic because of the creepy smile. Maybe some of you guys like that smile. Peripheral Greek temples are ones that have the single column around the side. Okay, the single column around the side. And then the cella was in the middle. Okay, so this is typical, simple style of an early Greek temple. And this is what it would have looked like. Some of them look like from the front. This one has columns around the edges. Pediment, obviously. Okay, Doric versus Ionic. Hopefully you can see a pretty clear distinction, right? Potentially.
Mm-hmm.
The greatest distinction is in the capital, this top part of the column. So Ionic has this curl. Okay, this always makes me think of Gotham for some reason, like Batman. I don't know why that Ionic column makes me think of like that city that was depicted. I don't know why. Is that weird?
Yes.
Well, fine. Whereas the Doric has a simpler, capital, right? Fluting is common for both. Typically, the Ionic has a base where the Doric column, the shaft just runs straight into the stylobate, that area you walk on, okay, the floor. And so typically this is just kind of jammed in. It doesn't have that bottom piece. We talked about the metope and the triglyph. Okay, where would the decoration have been on this?
The pediment?
Pediment and the metope here, this little section. Where were you saying? In the cornice?
Oh, no.
Yes, the metope is typically where the decoration would have been. It would have been divided up. Whereas on Ionic, this entire frieze could have decoration in it, as well as the pediment. Okay, cornice at the top. This is a cornice here, and we see those get really big at different times in history. Remember the ones in Rome that are like huge at the palazzos. Okay, and then we already talked about the pediment. Entablature refers to this entire top section. Okay, so entablature and column are how you divide up. And this obviously will be on School Town, so if you want to go back through it. And, I mean, all the PowerPoints are on School Town, so if you want to go even further back. Hey!
Thanks for twinsies.
Oh my gosh! Yay!
Yay! You're so late.
Do you guys want me to go and order pizza? I'm buying the pizza.
Darn, I'm gonna miss that.
I don't eat pizza.
Dang
You don't eat pizza? Oh.
I'm counting calories.
And you're
No.
you're
You
going
wanna
I know.
Yes, you left it here, and I stuck it right up top by the soap dispenser.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, some art one kids were looking at it, and I was like, don't! Grace's art history. I know. Actually, I was like, look through there, check the class. Okay, so you don't want pizza. Do you want me to order something else?
No, I
Order
don't
Chinese
care.
food.
No, it doesn't matter.
I can order Chinese food. I can order whatever.
I'm
I'm
don't take
buying.
my input.
Yeah, I don't care. No, it's fine.
We can force feed it to her.
Force feed it to
Yeah,
her.
it doesn't matter.
Oh, but
No, it doesn't bother me. It's
okay. Well, what do y'all want? Because it's gonna
I
take
don't
like
wanna stay.
45
I
minutes
really-
or so probably
Should
to
I
get
stop
here.
the recording?
Oh, probably.